hello. Okay, so today what we're working on is percent equations. So we're going to talk first about where they come from, and then we're going to talk about how to use them. And then once you've done this, on this lesson, you're going to use all percent equations. Okay, so when you do this, then you're going to get a feel for when it's best to use percent equations, when it's best to use percent proportions. And then we'll be doing application stuff. So when we do applications, you see a review coming up, which means there's a test coming up. All right, so let's move on. Started out with this proportion, right? That's what we've been talking about. So all we're really going to do here is solve for the part. So when we solve for the part, we're going to multiply both sides times W to get rid of the W, which means we're going to wind up with, that's 1, so we wind up with the part equals the percent over 100 times the whole. That's it. That's the percent equation. Now, this is the one you're probably most familiar with. So this was pretty much the general 6th grade, 5th grade math you did, if you did this. But this is where it comes from. So now you know what you're doing with it. Now you've practiced the percent proportion. And I've always told you you could solve that proportion by solving for the variable. So now we're just going to go back to what we were doing before. We're going to label, let's just take these first three and let's label the part, the whole, and the percent. Okay, you do that, circle it, label it, and then let's set up the equation. Okay, circle and label, put pause, circle and label, and we'll go from there. Okay, so you should have labeled this. Should be able to see your part. Okay, so we're going to follow this. You've got it all written out. Hopefully you've matched up what I've got matched up, and now we're just going to fill in the space. We don't know what the part is on this one. We do know the percent. The percent is going to be 55 over 100, and the whole is going to be 128. And this becomes 0.55 times 128. So P equals 70.4. Okay, so your answer is 74 is 55% of 128. That's your answer. Okay, set up the equations for the next two. You should see where they make a difference. Okay, so hit pause, set up the equation, solve, and we go from there. So here's your two equations. Now again, you'll notice something. You're going to start noticing some things with this. When we look at this second one, we're just taking 0.27 times 72. So the part equals 19.44. Now, assuming they're keeping it rounding in the nearest hundredth, if you round in the nearest tenth, that would just be 19.4. But if you round in the nearest hundredth, that's 19.44. By default, you're going to round in the nearest hundredth unless it tells you to round to the nearest tenth. You might want to write that down somewhere. By default, you round to the nearest hundredth unless they tell you to round to the nearest tenth or the nearest whole number. Or unless we're talking about people, because we don't like talking about half a person, right? So your answer here is 19.44 is 27% of 72. Now the next one, that's where you see it gets a little harder. So this is where you distinguish between, are you better to use the percent equation or percent proportion? If we look at this, now what we can do is we can understand that this is going to be, we could just move that over to the, we could say this is going to be the same thing as 12 equals 80 times x over 100, which means we could just isolate those two and say that's 0.8. So we could say that 12 equals 0.8x, right? 0.8, because that's what 80 over 100 is. Then we divide both sides by 0.8. And that means we got 1x and whatever 12 divided by 0.8 is. So that means that x equals 15. What was x? X was our percent. What was our question? 12 is what percent of 80? And so our answer is that 12 is 15% of 80. That's our answer. Here's our solution. This is our answer. Okay. Now, this next one, again, this one works the same way. So I'm just going to leave this one up to you to do. So go ahead and write it down, do it, and come to class, and I'll tell you what the outline in a minute. At the end of the video, I'll show you the answer to this one. So let's go to what we're going to really be working on, where it gets the hardest and where you have to determine which one you want to do. This is going to be when we're talking about story problems. So here's your story problems. Now what I want you to do first is I want you to go through and on each one of these story problems, what I want you to do is circle the part, circle the whole, and circle the percent and label them. Now, if you've noticed, I asked you to do that GimKit. That GimKit will help you work through this. That's its whole focus. Is can you look at a story problem and distinguish between part, the whole, and the percent. Okay, so just practice this. Let's go ahead, circle, and then see if you can lay out the percent equation. Remember that percent equation is always going to be that we have the part equals the percent over 100 times the whole. Okay, so you're going to label for the part, the whole, and the percent, and then you're going to set up the equation. Go. See if you did this right. Okay, so this is the part. I know it's the part because down here it says that the course is 150 miles long, and we've ridden so far 36 miles. Okay, when I look at the second one, Charity said that the charity received a donation of $225.2 million. That this represents 39% of the charities. So that means that's a part, right? And then for example number 7, says that a book sold 114,625 copies in the first month of release. This represents, again, it says this represents, which means that's the part. So again, the percents, this is what percentage. So that means we don't know it yet. As soon as you see that what percentage, that's what you're trying to figure out. Okay, when we look at this one, it says this represents 39%, so we know our percent is 39. And then this represents 7.5% of the copies sold. So go ahead and write those labels down somewhere so you know. I mean, the best practice is to get to where you're distinguishing and you're writing down what's the part, what's the percent, what's the whole. Okay, so go ahead and check this and make sure you know that you've lined this up, that you know what they equal, because you want to make sure, I mean, that's the first thing. You can't set up the equation until you know the parts, right? Until you know what you're plugging it in for. So that's really important. So make sure you have that correct. And now write out the equation. So we're going to set this first one up. We don't know the percent, but we do know the part. The part is 36 equals, and we know we're going to have over 100, right? And we know that the whole is 150. We don't know the percent yet, so we're just going to put an X there. Now, as mentioned in a previous problem, I would just rewrite this. 36 equals, we still don't know what X is, but we do know that we have 150, so we just say that's 150 times the X over 100, right? Now I'm going to isolate those. So I'm going to just kind of put this like this because that would be the same thing, right? So that's going to be 150 divided by 100, which is 1.5. So that means what I have is 36 equals 1.5 times x. So that means now what I'm going to do to undo this, to solve for x, I'm going to undo the multiplication, which is by division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 1.5. So I get that x equals 24. Now, look, I'm going to check, right? If you want to really check, you're just going to draw that bar model out. So if you drew the bar model out and you knew that the whole was 150 and that the part you're talking about is 36, well, if I thought about this, if I just broke it into half, where this is 50% and this is 50%, then each one of those is going to be 75, right? And if I broke that into another half, to where this is 25% and this is 25%, then each of these would be 37.5. If I look, my number is just a little bit lower than 36 miles. This is the part. Each one of these is the part, right? And so that means if this is 37.5 for 25%, then 36 must be a little bit less than 25%. And my answer is that 24, that the percentage Cassidy, so again, I've got to write my answer out. Cassidy has ridden 24% of the rides so far, or of the course so far. That's my answer. But the bar model can help you think about, do you have the right answer? So those of you that want to be sure, you want to draw that bar model out first. But this is how we solve it right here. Okay, so now you set up the next two, set up the equation and solve it. Go. Hit pause and then go. Okay, so as you look at this, what you should have gotten when you look at the first one, again, you should have set that up, right? And as you're looking at it, you should have set this up and then part, whole, put everything in its place. And then hopefully what you're realizing is when they give you the percent, you're turning that into a decimal, right? Because 39 divided by 100 is 0.39. Okay? It's 39 100ths. So this is the tenths place value. That's the hundredths place value. It's 39 100ths. Okay? Now, I know some of you learned rules about how to move the decimal, but then most of you will ask me, when do I move it to the left and when do I move it to the right, which means it's a rule of how to do it, not why you do it. And this is why you do it, because it's 39 100ths. So we're looking at the place value, that's hundredths, right? That's tenths, that's 100ths. So we have 0.39. When we divide both sides by 0.39, we wind up with this long number. Now remember, we're talking about millions of dollars. And they said round to the nearest million, which means basically round to the nearest whole number. Which, now this is where some of you are making mistakes. This would be 65 because of that 6. So you would say the total amount of, so you would just say 65 million. This is how you would write it. $65 million were donated in total. That's how you write that answer. Okay. Again, if you want the 4, you got to write the answers. Okay. And you got them, write them so they communicate you know what you're doing. Now this one you would have set up, it's the same thing. But see, you need to remember that this is 7/100ths, which this is the hundredths place value. So this is, if you have half, this puts this to be thousandths then. And there's the thousandths place value. Okay, so this is 0.075. Then we divided both sides by 0.075. We got 195,000. And so that means you could say that 195,000 copies have been sold to date. Notice all we're doing is copying the question, answering the question. Okay, so I think that's about enough for you. Now we are going to talk about these in class. So if you want a little bit of a head start, okay, you could look at this and see if you can understand it. Okay, when we look at this, when we look at these pie charts, we're going to look and say, what is the part and what is the whole? The whole thing is the family budget, the annual income. Its total income is 89,000. That's the whole. And then look at each piece, and you just have to remember that you're going to get different questions, but your questions on the quiz are all going to kind of look like this. If we said clothing, that's 14%. If we said how much of it's budgeted for housing, well, that's 22%. If we said we were looking for how much of it is in insurance, well, that's going to be 11%. So whatever they tell us we're going to do for, we'll talk about this in class. And then they should, if you added them all together, add up to about the same amount, which is the total. So if nothing else, go through here now and just circle which one's the part, which one's the whole, and which one's the percent. Okay? Now you notice on this you have every one of these is a percent. So, but look at these and what are you looking for? Okay, that's about it. That wraps it up. This is a bit, but it is a bit to learn. So good luck.